right? And if you told a joke and it bombed, you just stood there like a dummy, like that, you know what I mean? You know the feeling.
The first television superstar was Milton Berle, because to him TV were sold out in stores in 1948. Restaurants closed early on Tuesday nights and crime rates decreased. Every week, 80% of Americans watched him. However, nobody took note when he passed away from cancer. He had been entirely forgotten by the very industry he founded. In a book, his own son called him a monster. He last made news when he groped RuPaul live on television. Without the cheers that characterized his entire life, the man they called Uncle Milty passed away by himself. The stage mother who went too far was Sarah Berlinger, who subsequently changed her name to Sandra Berle. She determined her son Milton would live it for her when her parents prevented her from pursuing her ambition of success in show business. When Milton demonstrated a talent for humor as a young child, Sarah gave up everything, her husband, her other children, her entire life, and concentrated only on turning him into a household name. She even changed her name to reflect his notoriety. She would intentionally make loud laughter in order to help Milton win over the audience. She risked being arrested for pushing him onto stages without his consent, merely to attract attention to him. She had a significant impact on Milton's life, as everyone knew, but at a high cost. Milton was left to bear the burden of her dreams when his father and siblings were disregarded. He claimed later in life that his mother had made the mother of burlesque Rose Lee resemble Mary Poppins. Milton's early years vanished nearly before they started. At the age of 5, he began performing in silent motion pictures. While other children played in parks, he made his first motion picture, The Perils of Pauline, in 1914. Milton was employed. Before turning 8, he starred in over 50 silent films. He co-starred with Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks in the films Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm and The Mark of Zorro. A career was exchanged for his youth. Due to his father's illness, he supported his entire family as a vaudeville and movie veteran by the time he was in his teens. Couldn't function. The pressure was tremendous. Milton's experience also demonstrates how Hollywood frequently exploited gifted children at the expense of their pleasure and well-being. Milton's early years took a turn for the worst when he was 12. Later on, he claimed that a chorus girl had robbed him of his virginity. Children were not safe in the vaudeville world. It was full of perilous situations, raunchy humor, and late nights. Milton was thrust into this adult world too soon, despite the fact that his mother was constantly close by. It wasn't a single negative encounter. It demonstrated how the entertainment industry failed to safeguard its most promising young performers. Milton said that the experience affected his perspective on relationships for the remainder of his life. Sarah was in charge of more than simply Milton's profession. She also controlled his romantic life. Sarah developed a technique to break things off if he saw a girl more than 3 times. He found it difficult to build genuine relationships because of her hold on him. He pursued women in an attempt to show that he wasn't a mama's boy, but he was always dependent on his mother's approval. Milton hardly ever attended school. He attended the Professional Children's School in New York, which was established in 1914 for children employed in the entertainment industry. The school allowed him to continue teaching basic skills, but its main goal was to keep children working. Milton was raised in a world of rivalry and celebrity, surrounded by other child stars. Later on, he felt isolated from everyday people. He lived in a world of acclaim rather than playgrounds. Joke theft was another claim to fame for Milton. A clever joke may sustain a vaudeville artist for years. However, Milton stole content so frequently that he was dubbed the thief of bad gag. Bob Hope used to quip that he enjoyed watching burlap on TV to gauge the success of his jokes. On air, Berle even ridiculed himself for it. "I'll have more jokes than I can manage," he declared during a 1947 radio program. The moniker stayed, but rather than harming him, it increased his notoriety. Milton was a well-known performer in New York by 1929. He headlined large venues and did 6 gigs a day. In a single run, he performed in 553 Ziegfeld Follies shows. He performs on the largest stages at venues like the Palace Theater. He never stopped working, switching between Broadway, movies, and vaudeville. He became one of the most well-known comedians of his era because to his mother's perseverance and his own talent. It wasn't a huge deal when Milton appeared on a Broadway stage in Florida in 1920 at the age of 12. He had already won a Charlie Chaplin lookalike competition and been working for 7 years acting in movies. His mother continued to press him. To draw attention to him, she even flung him into the stage once during an Al Jolson performance. Because of his upbringing, Milton was constantly in need of praise and had to prove himself. Milton stunned audiences by performing comedy and drag during the 1920s and 1930s. Even though it was illegal to wear women's clothing on stage at the time, Milton did it. He was featured on the cover of Newsweek because of his outrageous Carmen Miranda act. When he appeared on Texaco Star Theater in 1948, his drag acts were so well-liked that everyone was watching him on TV, which caused a drop in crime during the show's run. Long before drag comedy gained popularity, Milton helped make it a component of popular entertainment. Milton's attempts were not all successful. He had a series of unsuccessful radio shows in the 1930s and 1940s. In 1934, he launched his debut show. Then came the Kiss and Makeup in 1946, followed by 3 ring times in 1941. None persisted beyond the season. To concentrate on radio, he even declined nightclub jobs that paid $25 a week, but to no avail. He was regarded as the most well-known failure in radio. He required a stage or a screen for his style, something that occurred on June 8, 1948. Permanently altered the entertainment industry. The debut edition of Texaco Star Theater was broadcast by NBC from Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center. It was more than a brand new program. The TV variety format was only getting started. Milton Berle became America's first television star that same evening. The program featured live ads, comedy segments, music, and vaudeville performers. It was entertaining, exciting, and new. Texaco was more than just a show sponsor. They became involved with it. Every show began with a group of Texaco singers and happy staff members dressed as guardian angels. Berle brought tremendous energy to television after already making a name for himself in vaudeville and radio. His rapid jokes, humorous clothes, and slapstick approach quickly got people talking. It was never the same on Tuesday nights. This was more than just amusement. At that point, television really started to permeate American culture. NBC wasn't sure about Berle at first. They experimented with Jack Carter, Maury Amsterdam, and George Price as hosts. At first, Berle's contract was limited for 4 weeks. Jack Carter even became host in August 1948. However, Berle's crazy comedy and showmanship were unmatched. On September 21, 1948, NBC officially announced it. The permanent host was Berle. He was more than simply a TV face. He was Mr. TV. He became famous because of his quips, outrageous outfits, and ability to connect with the audience. The story was told by the ratings. Up to 80% of the TV viewers watched the show during its height. We can't even fathom that amount in the modern era. His popularity demonstrated that one celebrity could support an entire business and a whole show. People weren't only captivated by Berle's wizardry on screens. It sold more televisions than ever before. Approximately 500,000 television sets were in American homes in 1948. By late 1949, the figure had soared to 2 million. After viewing Berle on Tuesday, family hurried to buy TV, and every Wednesday, retailers ran out of them. It was dubbed the Berle effect. In addition to altering viewing preferences, his program contributed to the growth of the entire television industry. Over 30 million TV sets were in American homes by the end of Berle's tenure in 1956. Berle had that type of authority. Uncle Milty was an unexpected nickname. Listen to your Uncle Milty and go to bed, Berle quipped during a 1949 performance. One line stuck. Millions of people suddenly felt like they knew Berle. He was viewed as a member of the family by both parents and children. It was more than a moniker. It demonstrated the power of television to unite people. Berle was doing more than amusing the country. It was being put together by him. America appeared to pause for Berle every Tuesday night. Movie theaters closed at 8 p.m. Restaurants closed early. People rushed home. In order to avoid missing the performance, guests at Lindy's in New York hurried to pay their checks. Between 9 p.m. and 9:5 p.m., Detroit City Reservoir's water levels decreased. To use the restroom, everyone waited until after the performance. Living rooms weren't the only spaces filled by Texaco Star Theater. It influenced the weekly schedule of the country. Tuesday night became a shared national occasion as a result. Berle was at the top of the globe by 1951. He signed a 30-year, $200,000 per year contract with NBC. Today, that amounts to almost $1.05 million annually. Whether he worked or not was irrelevant. All NBC wanted was to prevent him from leaving. The money continued to flow even after his popularity declined. The sum decreased when they renegotiated in 1966. However, the agreement remains one of the most amazing contracts in television history. The 1951 season demonstrated the extent of Berle's show's growth. It received a 61.6 Nielsen rating. In other words, he was watched weekly in more than 6 out of 10 houses with televisions. There isn't another show like it today. Texaco Star Theater was more than just a show back then. It was a nationwide occurrence. It was a must-see TV show because of the vaudeville, guest stars, and Berle's outrageous costumes. By the time he resigned in 1956, TV sales had increased from 500,000 to over 30 million sets thanks to his ratings. Berle's humor has no bounds. For laughter, he would frequently dress in drag. Here's the unexpected bit, though. Cross-dressing was prohibited in numerous jurisdictions in the 1950s. Because he made sure everyone knew he wasn't gay, Berle was able to stay out of trouble. He was able to get away with actions that might have led to others being imprisoned because of this double standard. His drag performances weren't merely amusing. They challenged preconceived notions about comedy and gender and pushed limits. Berle stood up for what was right as well. Berle declined to continue when Texaco attempted to stop the Four Step Brothers, a black dance group, from performing. He told Texaco just minutes before airing, "If they don't go on, I don't go on." Texaco conceded. The color barrier for variety shows was broken by the Four Step Brothers' live performance. It was a courageous action that paved the way for black performers across. The life of Milton Berle was a whirlwind of tragedy, treachery, love, and fame. In 1941, he married showgirl Joyce Matthews for the first time. It was doomed from the beginning. It was more than just a husband and wife issue. Sarah, Berle's mother, was there. She embodied the quintessential controlling stage mother. She even made burlesque Rose Lee's mother appear like Mary Poppins, according to Berle's jokes. Berle felt conflicted. He was unsure of whether to appease his mother or his wife. The drama continued after the marriage ended in 1947. Berle and Matthews made another attempt in 1949. In an attempt to start again, they got married again, but nothing had changed. In 1950, another divorce resulted from the same emotional tug of war, but destruction was extensive. Matthews attempted suicide in her married lover Billy Rose's house following their second breakup. Berle's reputation was damaged by the affair. Later on, he acknowledged that his mother's dominance not only destroyed his marriages but also stoked his desire to have as many affairs as possible to establish his manhood. Whether these affairs were real, they became legendary. Berle asserted that he had dated celebrities like Dorothy Kilgallen, Betty Hutton, and Marilyn Monroe. Amy Semple McPherson, too. In 1948, the Monroe narrative began on the Ladies of the Chorus set. She was said to be a lady who valued herself by Berle, who talked well of her. However, Monroe claimed she didn't even recall being involved with him when they collaborated on Let's Make Love in 1960 years later. It must have been painful. The most ridiculous thing he said was regarding McPherson, the well-known preacher. Berle's book had private meetings, but McPherson's family and biographers deemed it to be a fabrication. Whether true or not, these tales depicted a man who was trying to break out from his mother's shadow and demonstrate that he wasn't merely a mama's boy. Following two unsuccessful unions with Matthews, Berle wed Ruth Cosgrove in 1953. He was 45. Ruth had a solid reputation as a publicist. Berle seems to have found tranquility for once. Ruth passed away from cancer in 1989 after 36 years of marriage. However, the wounds caused by his mother's dominance never went away. Berle acknowledged that even this marriage was plagued by his mother's meddling. He found it difficult to build genuine relationships, constantly seeking female attention and battling past issues. Although he and Ruth appeared steady in public and had adopted a kid, the reality was more nuanced. His internal conflicts never ceased. Then everyone was astonished at the secret. Berle and showgirl Junior Standish had a son, Bob Williams, around 1951. Berle acted as though he had only adopted children for decades. Unaware of the truth, Bob grew up seeing Berle at parties. Berle claimed that he kept it a secret out of consideration for Bob's mother. Berle was in his 80s when the truth was revealed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The harm was done by then. The disclosure further exacerbated the disorder in Berle's personal life and demonstrated once more how his world was created by secrets. Then the fall happened. TV made its way to rural America in the early 1950s. Viewers from small towns didn't find Berle's fast city humor funny. He had 80% of the audience when he was at his best. His show fell to 13th position by 1954-55. Texaco stopped sponsoring. NBC made every effort, but to no avail. The former television tycoon was unable to engage the new national viewership. The Heartland wasn't suited to his city slicker aesthetic. His fate was sealed by domestic sitcoms. I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners' endearing familial humor won hearts. For 4 seasons, I Love Lucy was the most popular show, reaching more than 15 million homes and generating ratings as high as 67.3. In 1953-54, Berle's show dropped to 5th place and continued to decline. The American public was no longer interested. Earlier, the fissures had been visible. In 1952-1953, Berle's show initially fell off the top spot. After the shows of Arthur Godfrey, it dropped to 3rd place. This went beyond just a decline in ratings. An era came to an end. The shifting tide was too strong for Berle's star power to withstand. He fell quickly and viciously. The situation was exacerbated by NBC deal with Berle. They signed him for 30 years in 1951 for $200,000 a year, which is more than $2 million today. When his fame waned, NBC was trapped whether he worked or not. In 1955, they tried to place him on everything they could and reduced his compensation to $120,000. In order to fulfill the obligation, he ultimately hosted events like Jackpot Bowling. For the network, what was once a great deal turned into a nightmare. Overexposure was the last blow. Berle was everywhere. People grew weary of his voice, his jokes, and his visage. What first felt new quickly became stale. His desperate attempts to win back supporters only made matters worse. He was the first celebrity to experience burnout on television. His tumble served as a warning. Even the biggest stars might go overnight in the fast-paced world of television. Once known as Mr. Television, Milton Berle rose to prominence in what many still consider to be the most disastrous Saturday Night Live episode in 1979 at the age of 71. Berle entered Studio 8H with the confidence of someone who had mastered early television and vaudeville. However, he failed to embrace the scathing new SNL style. Racist and homophobic remarks abound throughout his opening monologue. He made derogatory remarks about Dolly Parton's body and targeted homosexuals, Arabs, and Puerto Ricans. The audience was taken aback. Gilda Radner and John Belushi were among the cast members who watched in horror. Later, author Rosie Schuster described it as repeatedly watching a comedic train disaster in slow motion. Berle's jokes were disrespectful in addition to being out of date. It was obvious that he didn't belong on that stage even for the 1970s. The catastrophe didn't stop there. Berle sung the song September as the performance came to an end. Then an odd thing occurred. 10 or so friends and family members sprang up and gave a boisterous round of applause after being planted on the balcony. The rest of the audience sat in uncomfortable quiet. It had all been set up by Berle. During a break, he even informed producer Lorne Michaels that the standing ovation was prearranged. Michaels was appalled. He wouldn't allow the balcony to be seen on the cameras. As a representation of Berle's frantic craving for attention and his complete inability to read the room, the incident went down in history. Berle's destiny with SNL was determined that evening. He was permanently banned by Lorne Michaels. The first and only host to be banned from the show was Berle. Its demise. Decades passed before his episode was broadcast again. No one ever crashed and burned like Berle, even when SNL dealt with challenging visitors. The episode acted as a warning when it eventually reappeared in 2003. Regardless of your level of fame, SNL required you to be respectful and flexible. On the list of the worst SNL hosts ever, Berle's name remains at the top. Sangel wasn't the only place where Berle fell. His glory days were over, and NBC was desperate to use him in 1959. On Phyllis Jackpot Bowling, they stuck him. This odd program continued until 1961. Berle spoke with celebrities who bowled for charity and attempted to inject humor into bowling tournaments. However, everyone was aware of his true motivation. It was necessary for NBC to burn off his costly contract. A sad chapter for a guy who was once acclaimed as the king of television. The show stopped after 6 months. Berle's haughtiness was intolerable throughout his stint on Saturday Night Live. "It might be over your heads," he said, dismissing the author's ideas. His old vaudeville routines were shoved in. His methods of robbing the camera felt really archaic. They knew it was going to be a disaster from the beginning, according to Lorne Michaels. The performance was spoiled by Berle's desperation to take center stage. Additionally, it left a lasting lesson about the consequences of a performer who refuses to change. It wasn't just Berle's public shortcomings. William, his adopted son, wrote a harsh memoir titled My Father, Uncle Milty, which was released in 1999. Hollywood was taken aback. Years of emotional neglect were detailed by William. He wrote about a father who was more interested in his work, gambling, and women than in his own child. One tale caught our attention. Berle bribed a prostitute to steal William's virginity when he was just 16 years old. This was noticed by William as one of the few times his father ever made an effort to show concern. However, it left him hurt and perplexed. In their strained relationship, another chilly and transactional scene, William continued after that. He explained how, in an effort to conceal his advanced age, Berle would heavily apply makeup prior to presentations. He made fun of his father as a conceited ex-boyfriend who was holding on to a bygone era. The book finally caused a rift between them. Berle never spoke to his son again because he was so furious. He lived up to that promise until his passing in 2002. The resentment persisted even after death. William made ominous remarks about his father's grave and protested to it. Their relationship was irreparably broken. The unfortunate reality is that Berle's own early years were linked to his shortcomings as a father. His mom was the quintessential stage mom. She destroyed his personal life and concentrated solely on his profession. If his romances went longer than 3 dates, she even ended them. Growing up, Berle was constantly searching for something he couldn't find and was ravenous for female attention. He was caught in a generation-long cycle of neglect and made the same mistakes with his own children. Milton Berle, formerly known as Mr. Television, was shocked by news in April 2001, as was everyone who still recalled his heyday. He was diagnosed with colon cancer by doctors. Inside him, a tumor had been growing. According to his physicians and wife, it was so slow-moving that it wouldn't seriously hurt him for another 10 to 12 years. He seemed to have time. It was time to reflect on his life. It might even be time for a final comeback attempt. However, that optimism was a delusion. Berle passed away on March 27, 2002, at the age of 93, less than a year later. His cancer progressed far more quickly than anyone had anticipated. It served as a harsh reminder of the unpredictability of life and death. Without the cheers that surrounding him in the past, the guy who had previously kept 80% of America glued to their TV sets on Tuesday nights was now fading, alone. Berle made a decision that left many perplexed. He declined to have surgery. Lorna Adams, his wife, encouraged him to think about it. Berle, however, refused. He took the physician's explanation of the delayed growth seriously. At his age, he believed the procedure was not worth the discomfort and recuperation. His choice was viewed as brave by some. Others interpreted it as surrender. He decided not to continue fighting after years of battling for attention and chuckles. However, the cancer did not wait 10 years. Within a year it took his life. Berle's last months were made even more depressing by the way the entertainment industry handled him. His performance was so well liked in the 1940s that stores would close early so that people could see it. Ultimately, however, his decline was little noted by the same business. There were no network calls, no large tributes, and no lavish farewells from up-and-coming comedians who owed their livelihoods to his groundbreaking work. A few old acquaintances attended his funeral. Hollywood's silence says it all. Notoriety fades, and the spotlight swiftly shifts. The last time Berle made headlines was in 1993, years earlier. At that time, he joined RuPaul at the MTV Video Music Awards. It was meant to be humorous. Berle's previous drag performances were referenced, but the situation became awkward and unattractive. Berle's jokes didn't work. RuPaul used the cutting line in retaliation. "You've changed from wearing dresses to diapers." Then, according to reports, Berle went too far. He made remarks that were disrespectful and out of place, and he touched RuPaul's chest without permission. The altercation backstage exacerbated the situation. RuPaul's reputation with MTV suffered as a result of the episode, and Berle appeared to be a man who was out of touch with modern society. Berle was no longer a show star in his latter years. Rather, he received invitations to charity roasts and gatherings where he was made fun of for his advanced age and former glory. As younger comics took aim, Berle would poke or interrupt them throughout their shows in an attempt to regain the spotlight. Seeing it hurt, hanging on to recollections of a world that had changed, the king of early television was relegated to the butt of the joke. There was an odd turn of events when Berle passed away on March 27, 2002. On the same day, two more Hollywood icons passed away. Filmmaker Billy Wilder and actor Dudley Moore. The burden of these other losses overshadowed the news of Berle's death. Not even his last headline could carry the weight of the guy who once dominated television. It felt like the end of an illustrious period in Hollywood history. Not just for Berle. The guy he had become was reflected in his burial on April 1, 2002. The chapel was packed with about 300 friends and celebrities. Don Rickles, Jane Meadows, Red Buttons, Sid Caesar, and Buddy Hackett were there. Jokes, laughter, and recollections abound in the service. In homage to his well-known fear of getting chilly, his trench coat and cap were used to drape his coffin. Berle made people grin even when he was dead. But there is more to Berle's narrative than a depressing conclusion. He was enormous in the 1940s and 1950s. 4TV sets out of 5 watched his Texaco Star Theater. Less than 500,000 houses had televisions when he began, but by 1954, over 26 million had. He contributed to television becoming the center of American culture. However, he was forgotten after a few decades. His brazen manner was out of style. He was passed by the very medium he helped create. The old stars were of no use to the new ones. Berle's mother had forced him onto the stage when he was 5 years old in an attempt to exert control over him. She handled every aspect of his career and broke up with him. It made it difficult for him to lead a typical life. It wasn't until he was 44 that he got married. His later years were characterized by declining fame, health issues, and the heartbreaking realization that the industry did not have a home for its elderly stars. Berle said that he had lost interest in making people laugh. All he wanted to do was laugh. His life, which is full of highs and lows, serves as a cautionary tale about how fame can both quickly elevate and deflate you.